Picture this. You step outside your warm house for 5 minutes and you're already whining about the cold. Meanwhile, a medieval shepherd stood alone in an open field inside a full blizzard like it was just another shift at work. No walls, no roof, no heating system, just a cloak of crook and whatever tricks he carried in his head. The wind hit him like flying knives, snow stacked on his shoulders, his tiny fire, one bad gust and poof gone. And yet, he didn't freeze. He slept. Warm. So here's the real question. How on earth did those shepherds not just survive, but stay comfortable out there? Because if it were us, we'd be popsicles before sunrise. Out there on the medieval plains, a shepherd didn't have the luxury of picking perfect conditions. Most nights weren't peaceful. Most nights felt like the wind had a personal grudge. 2 directions at once slicing across the field, slipping under every layer you thought would keep you warm. No walls, no hut, not even a sad little bush to hide behind. Just you, the dark, and a wool cloak that suddenly mattered more than your whole paycheck's worth of winter gear today. And here's the problem. Wind doesn't just chill you, it steals your heat. Fast. Ground cold pulls the warmth from your back. Airflow rips it off your skin. Before long, you're leaking heat like a cheap apartment leaking warm air through the windows. But medieval shepherds, they figured out a workaround so simple it borders on genius. Instead of wearing the cloak, they used it. Half of it went straight to the ground. Boom, instant insulation so their body wasn't hugging frozen dirt. The other half folded over their shoulders, edges tucked tight, knees pinning everything in place. One piece of wool turned into a 2-layer cocoon, a mini shelter built from nothing but fabric and physics. Suddenly, the wind hit the cloak, not the skin. The ground touched wool, not flesh. Tiny air pockets trapped inside the fabric warmed up, creating a little bubble of heat, the kind modern sleeping bags brag about. Primitive, maybe. Effective, absolutely. And that's the part we forget today. We think survival is all gadgets and high-tech gear, but those shepherds turned one cloak into a shelter without a single stitch added. No zipper, no insulation foam, just technique, just knowledge, and it kept them alive. The principle hasn't changed. Modern sleeping bags follow the same rule. The only difference, they had wool and wisdom. If you've ever stood in a winter crosswind, you know the kind, the wind that doesn't just push you, it cuts you. Now imagine that same wind hitting you out on an empty medieval field, nothing but frozen grass for miles. No barn, no rock wall, no let me just step inside for a second. Out there, a sideways gust could drain your body heat faster than your apartment drains warm air through old windows. But the shepherd had one secret weapon. You and I don't the flock. Sheep aren't just cute lawnmowers, they're walking insulation units. And when the wind roared, they did something brilliant without being told. They turned their backs to it. All of them, instinctually. A dozen wool-covered bodies lining up like nature's armored wall. That's when the shepherd realized the trick. He didn't need a shelter. He could stand behind one. So he'd nudge the flock guide them to face the wind, then settle himself right in the pocket behind them, sometimes dead center, sometimes tucked behind the thickest few. 2 or 3 sheep became his personal windbreak. The whole flock became a barricade, and inside that living wall, a tiny microclimate formed. Less wind, less heat loss, more warmth than you'd ever expect from a bunch of animals just doing what animals do. Primitive, maybe. Effective, absolutely. And let's be clear, he wasn't using their body heat like some medieval space heater. This wasn't snuggle for survival. It was airflow control. The wool caught the wind so his skin didn't have to. Just like modern windbreak fencing farmers still use today. Think about that. No tools, no gear, no Costco winter jacket. Just a man, a storm, and a flock that knew exactly how to stand their ground. You and I panic when the space heater flickers for 5 seconds. But a medieval shepherd, he had to keep warm with whatever he could carry. And spoiler alert, he couldn't carry much. Firewood was precious. A big bonfire looked heroic, sure, but in a storm, it died faster than your phone battery in the cold. And the real enemy wasn't even the air, it was the ground. Frozen earth sucks heat from your body like a vacuum hose. Lay straight on it and you're done. That's why these shepherds cooked up one of the smartest low-tech hacks you'll ever hear. Instead of fighting the storm with a big flame, they hid the heat under the ground. A shallow pit no deeper than your hand. A small fire burned inside it until the coals glowed red. Then came the magic move. They covered the coals with a layer of ash. Not to put the fire out, but to trap the heat. Ash is insulation, nature's blanket. Once the pit was sealed, the earth warmed up from below. The shepherd would stretch out right on top sometimes on a thin layer of cloth, sometimes straight on the warm soil. And suddenly he wasn't lying on ice anymore. He was lying on a slow-release heater, 2 hours of heat, sometimes 4. No flame needed, no smoke, no constant tending. If that sounds familiar, it should. It's radiant floor heating, medieval edition, primitive maybe, effective absolutely. And here's what I love. They didn't waste a drop of energy. The fire wasn't blazing into the wind. It wasn't fighting the storm. It was hidden, protected, stored in the dirt like a thermal battery. Gear breaks, fires blow out, but knowledge stays warm. If you've ever sat on cold ground, you know the feeling. It doesn't just chill you, it steals your heat. Fast. And a medieval shepherd didn't need a science class to learn that. One night, lying on snow, and you instantly understand ground cold is the silent killer. Up to 60% of your body heat can vanish into the earth like you're plugged into a giant ice socket. That's why their sleep system was pure brilliance. No fancy gear, no REI catalog, just sheepskin and wool, 2 materials they carried every single day. The trick wasn't wearing them, it was layering them right. First layer, the sheepskin, fur side up, leather side down. The wool fibers created tiny air pockets, nature's insulation, and the leather block drafts sneaking up from the earth. Think of it as putting down the foundation of a house. You don't start with the roof, you start with the floor. Second layer, the shepherd himself lying on that warm base instead of freezing dirt. Third layer, the wool cloak wrapped tight around his body. Neck covered, shoulders sealed, edges tucked like a medieval burrito. Suddenly, he wasn't just staying warm, he was inside a heat trap. A pocket of air formed between the layers, and once his body warmed it, that air stayed put. And the payoff. No radiant heat loss, no cold spots, no why is my back freezing but my chest is fine nonsense. Just steady warmth through the night. Primitive maybe. Effective absolutely. Here's the cool part. This is the same principle modern bushcrafters use today. Reindeer hide under wool blanket over. A 3-layer sleep system. A bottom barrier. A human heat source. A top insulator. They didn't have gear, but they had knowledge. And knowledge weighed nothing, while saving everything. There's one thing every outdoorsman eventually learns the hard way. Cold air's annoying. But wind is the real villain. Wind strips heat off your body faster than any snowpack ever could. And out on a medieval field, a shepherd didn't have trees barns or a cozy cabin corner to hide behind. Just open land and a few scattered stones the size of grocery bags. Not much, but enough. Because here's the clever part. He realized he didn't need a full wall. He just needed a shape, a half circle, a wind shadow. He'd drag 4, maybe 6 big stones together, placing them in a broad arc, facing the main direction of the wind. The stones weren't tall, just knee-high, but height wasn't the point. Shape was. When wind hits a curved line, it bends, splits, rolls over. Instead of hitting the shepherd square in the chest like a punch, it breaks apart, losing speed, losing force, losing bite. Primitive airflow engineering. Then the shepherd would lie right at the inner edge of that arc cloak, wrapped tight back to the stones. Suddenly, the wind hit rock, not ribs. The temperature didn't magically rise, but the heat loss slowed down sometimes enough to mean the difference between shivering all night or actually getting some sleep. Primitive, maybe. Effective, absolutely. And the funny thing, this is the same principle mountaineers still use today, finding the wind shadow a pocket of calm behind a curve or ridge. The shepherd just built his own from whatever the land gave him. Minimal labor, massive payoff. No tarp, no tent stakes, no $300 ultralight windbreak, just stones, a smart arc, and a man who understood that in winter, survival beating the wind is half the battle. You ever try sitting on your couch, knees up to your chest, wrapped in a blanket because your heater is taking too long, yeah? A medieval shepherd did the exact same pose, except he wasn't in a living room. He was in an open field, in a blizzard, with nothing but wool instinct and whatever courage he had left in the tank. And he learned one brutal truth: fast lying down was suicide. The ground stole heat like a thief in the night. 1 hour on frozen soil, and your core temp dropped faster than weak Wi-Fi in a storm. So he switched tactics. He stopped fighting the cold with comfort. He fought it with geometry. Here's the trick they figured out: keep the core tight. Keep everything off the ground. Simple, smart, life-saving. He crouched low, almost sitting on his heels, knees tucked to his chest, arms wrapped around his shins, wool cloak pulled over the whole body like a tiny tent, head tucked deep into the hood where his breath warmed the air like a built-in space heater. The less surface area touching the ground, the slower the heat loss. The tighter the posture, the warmer the center. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't comfy, but it worked, and it kept him alive. Shepherds across medieval Europe used this posture on the worst nights where sleeping flat meant never waking up. They weren't doing yoga, they were protecting the furnace that mattered most to the core. All heat comes from there. Lose it, and the rest follows. Funny thing, modern survival manuals still teach a version of this fetal position for emergency warmth. It's the same idea, just with nicer branding and better marketing. But back then, no manuals, no ultralight gear, just knowledge passed down, firelight wisdom whispered across generations. And that's the beauty of it. Primitive maybe, effective absolutely. Let me tell you one of the weirdest tricks medieval shepherds ever pulled off, because it sounds like something you'd only try when things get truly desperate. And out there in an open field with the wind cutting sideways like flying razors. Yeah, desperate was the default setting. Here's what they noticed when the wind howled hard enough the flock didn't scatter. They huddled, and when they huddled, the wind piled snow behind them in a long curved ridge. A natural snow wall, a drift, a shield, and a shepherd with half a brain and frozen fingers wasn't going to waste that gift. He couldn't stack stones. He couldn't build a fence. He couldn't even hold a candle-sized fire in that gale. But he could let nature work for him. All he had to do was wait 10, maybe 20 minutes until the wind sculpted that drift into a solid barrier. Then he slipped right into the wind shadow behind it, tucked low in that quiet pocket, pulled his cloak over the top like a roof. Suddenly, the blizzard wasn't smashing him in the face anymore. The drift broke the wind, the snow insulated the ground, and what was chaos a few steps away became a tiny microclimate warm enough to sleep in. Not luxury, survival. Fresh snow is full of air pockets, and air is insulation's best friend. The same physics that keeps an igloo warm was working right there behind a bunch of sheep. And the shepherd. He didn't complain. He didn't fight it. He used it. That's the theme of real survival. You don't win by overpowering nature. You win by reading it, by understanding it, by letting it do half the work. Primitive maybe, effective absolutely. When the storm finally eases, the field goes quiet in that strange, holy way only winter can make. The wind settles, the snow softens, and somewhere behind a drift, the shepherd rises slowly, brushing powder off his cloak, like it's just another day on the job. No heater humming, no insulated boots, not a single gadget, just knowledge, and the courage to use it. That's the part we forget. Medieval folks didn't survive because they carried the right gear, they survived because they understood the rules. Ground steals heat, wind kills warmth, fresh snow insulates, wool traps air, sheep make shelter. They weren't improvising, They were applying physics the same way you and I clicked the thermostat up one notch. It makes you wonder, right? We have warm houses, hot showers, and jackets that cost more than rent, but they had technique, real technique, the kind that doesn't rely on batteries, chargers, or next-day shipping. And here's the truth that ties it all together. Warmth doesn't come from equipment. Warmth comes from knowing what the cold is trying to do to you and knowing how to answer back. And trust me, there are still more medieval tricks out there, methods so clever that modern science is only now catching up. But that's a story for the next fire.